Perfect segue. No, we will cover the battery and we'll go into more detail, but the first thing and stuff is we'll go briefly over the components, which you have on your front page there. That's all these. And I think I may just start with the battery, but I think I'll breeze over all the components first real quick, say what their purpose is, and then we'll go into more detail on each one back around. So the batteries here on the bottom, this is the inverter, which is also a charger, solar charger, shore power charging. There's your two charges. And then your portable panel charger, which is covered under the plastic in the back. That is for the portable panel that you can buy online. That's on your noted on the front. You can go to Mint City Solar. The regulator here is also tied into the alternator, and that controls your charging from there. So we'll go into those details. Then the samkoon screen, and then you got the two battery switch. So that'll lead us back to the battery, and I'll start to go into a deep dive on that stuff a little bit more. So you got a battery switch, which is right next to the samkoon screen, which is usually in the overhead. This is the battery screen monitor, okay? So the first thing you usually want to do is either turn it on or turn it off to see what's going on if you got power, like he says. This one up by the front, people push it, don't do anything, what the heck's going on? They're trying to figure out. That's because there's a locking one that we put in the back by the inverter here, which you can only see about that much of the inverter when you take the cover off. If you touch that, you know, it's off, you'd have to have it on, that lights that up. But the first thing you want to do is remove all charging before you're ever going to shut it down. So this system's on. I've seen it up here. This is lit up. I see it back here because this is on. I can shut that off. And then remove the charging, which is the shore power. Make sure the engine's off. Make sure all your charging off. And then this is a self-lock switch. So you can see it compresses in. If you push it, it pops out. That's going to shut down the battery. You still have some transient power in there. It takes a second for that to shut off. Now the battery's in slumber mode. What there is there's solenoids in there. It's pretty much opening those solenoids in the end of the battery from the cells. The cells will remain charged in there. It's just a solenoid at the end of it. That's what's happening. So when I come back in, let's say the unit's all the way down. I've had it in storage for a month, like Corey said, and I want to charge it. Make sure that I'm good, make sure that, you know, it's a healthy. I can come back in here, I push that button in, nothing happens. That's because that's locking the back. We keep that separate so kids don't push it by accident. Once again, that's why it's back there.
Button stays in.
Yep, that locks in. That's why it's called self-lock. It holds in. Okay. This is a self-resetting, so it says self-reset. Now I hold that down, and you'll watch this screen here. You hold it in, you hold it compressed, you'll see all this come up, and even the lights and stuff come on, and you'll see the voltage. That's when you can let go. So that means your battery's now active. Now if I want to turn on the inverter, I can push that button and you'll see that light up back there, or even up at the switch, which is by the monitor. Those lights will light up for a second, and then it has to go through its self-check, and it'll do its thing and turn on the inverter. The only time you have the inverter on, though, is if I'm on shore power, the charge, or pull bypass power through it, or if I want to run 110 like wall outlets, use those inside the coach. The reason for that is Jayco did the smart thing and went with a DC air conditioner. You don't need it for that. DC refrigerator, you don't need the inverter for that, because every inverter uses power when it's on. If you leave this on, it will take 10% of this massive battery every 24 hours because it's just sitting there not doing anything. So the only time to turn it on is when you have it plugged into shore or when you're using 110 outlets. The same thing with 12 volt. You don't want to leave that on there and have you drain that battery all the way down, and then you go out there and have a customer and you have to recover the battery and you don't have any battery. Worst way to kill a cell, or best way to kill a cell, have it not working. So you don't want to have that. And that's what Corey's talking about, maintenance. You want to make sure that you're maintaining that battery, and it goes through there in that document. It's 100% up to a month, 70% from 1 to 3 months. Long term, you want to be about 50%. That's the same as you'll see for EV cars too, if you go into how to store them. Lithium's the same no matter what. So across the board, that storage, you want to maintain that and protect it. And cold weather, you want to take more, like leaving it charged or protecting it from the cold as much as possible. Now for more details back in the, you can see this says lithium iron phosphate. Some people go with nickel, magnesium, cobalt. All lithium is not the same. A lot of people think, well, it's a lithium battery. No, there's different chemistries. We go with the iron phosphate because it's a lot more stable without having other protections. Like nickel, magnesium, cobalt in cars, they have to have a cooler to keep it cool so it doesn't overheat. And that's been a problem in cars. Even Tesla now has switched. Their new plant in Shanghai uses the same chemistry, lithium iron phosphate. It's a lot more easier to get. It's not a combative mineral like nickel and cobalt. So it's easier to access. So it's a little more price stable. Plus, it's more stable in environments, high temp environments. That's why we go with that. Next thing you'll notice, it says 51.2 volts. I thought you said it was a 48 volt system. Well, just like cars, your battery's 12 volts, actually 12.8, it could go up to 13.6, usually when you're charging. So you'll see those voltages, that's a nominal voltage. People call it 48 volt because that's where it starts. That's usually the starting. So if you ever want to check your system to see anything, if it's getting close to 48 volts though, it's pretty much dead. It's ready to be charged. Usually you start charging at 50 volts on a 48 volt system. The next thing you'll notice is it says amp hours. So this is a 210 amp hour. Some customer comes in and they go, hey, I get this option with a brand W or something that has a 12 volt system in it. They don't tell you the 12 volt, they only tell you the amp hours. They say 300 amp hours. That's bigger than yours. Why is yours more expensive? Well, you have to multiply it. Volts times amps equals watts. That's the one thing, if you're going to leave with this session with anything, that's the number one thing, because that's going to be your miles per gallon for cars. Everybody wants to know how many miles per gallon a car gets, right? For batteries, it's going to be volts times amps. So it's going to be that same math. What can I do? How far can I drive my car on a tank of gas? How far can I use my air conditioner on a battery? Those are the same questions. It comes down to simple math. Volts times amps equals watts. And I'll give you some examples as we go through here a bit. But the thing about that is, so going back to the example I gave, 300 times 12 volt system is how many watts? 3,600. So ours is 51.2 times 210 amp hours. That's over 10,000 watts. So they think that, hey, look, yours is inferior. 210, right away, you got over 3 times what they have. And the best way to do that is when, as soon as they walk in and you're comparing to lithium and they start to bring up amp hours, stop right there, write down a piece of paper, how many amp hours are you comparing this to? What voltage is that system? Then right below that, write down what ours is and do the math right for them. And now you've made them believe that you know what you're talking about. You're educating them. Education is going to be a key component as we move forward. You're going to see more lithium and solar over the next 12 months on RVs than you've ever seen the growth even to date so far. So this is really going to be powerful as you go forward. From there, this has a heating blanket in it also. Doesn't take from the battery, it takes from the charging source to heat it. So the heat works on its own. As soon as it sees a charge going into it and it's cold out, it's going to heat itself before it starts to charge. Remember, the next thing is also, let's say it is a dead battery like we talked about before. The way you want to charge it, even though we got those 4 different ways to charge it, is the shore power is going to be your best. It's going to cycle it until it recovers the battery. So just plug it in, walk away from it for a little bit, and it kick on and off. You do have to make sure that your inverter's on. A lot of people I'll call and they'll say like, yeah, I plugged it in, it started to click on, click off, click on, and I'm like, yep. And they say, and I walked away and I came back later and it was all the way off. I'm like, is the inverter on? They're going, yeah, it started to charge, I told you. No, it'll do that even if the button's off, just to try to recover itself. But then it realizes the inverter's off and it shuts right down. You do have to have an inverter on to charge the battery from shore power. The light's
got to be on.
Yes. And then it come on as it cycles though, because it has to see the power. You remember me say on all lithium chargers, even if you buy one on Amazon, little tiny one, it cycles that on. That's how it tells the BMS, hey, this is the proper charging, so it lets it activate. That's how you charge lithium. And lithium can only take a real low current when it's down at the bottom or at the top. That's why when you see EV cars, they always say, oh, 80% charge in 40 minutes. It's because you can't charge fast at the bottom and you can't charge fast at the top. So the bottom 15% or so in cars, you have to be there, and then it only takes it to 90 because it has to taper off at the top. In between, you can pretty much give it as much power as you can produce. That's the same with this. You can take up to 100 amps continuous on this, so like you can fill this up in 2 hours, which you can with the alternator. So you could fill this up in 2 hours driving down the road and be running the air conditioner full blast. Still good. That's how good their alternator package they're putting on the Jayco is. So that maximizes that charging. That's another thing that leads. Everything on here you're going to see leading Jayco leads on everything. There's only one manufacturer that has a much more expensive thing that has a bigger battery. The thing about it, they don't have a DC air conditioner. So an AC air conditioner uses 1,500 watts. Back to that math, if you're dividing that in and you're doing those battery comparisons, the DC air conditioner only uses 900. The AC air conditioner has to go through an inverter. You lose 10% more efficiency right there. So you're talking twice the runtime on an DC air conditioner as an AC air conditioner with the same battery. I mean, it's crazy how much the differences are. Never mind the quality of the actual air conditioner unit. Most of the AC ones use an Asian compressor versus a German compressor, which is used on most of the DC components. So those are big advantages on the system. Going back to the inverter will also, you're 3,500 watts. So let's say you're up against one of those other brands. They're using an AC air conditioner. If it's 1,500 watts and they got a 3,000 watt inverter, how much do they have left? 1,500 watts, right? So with ours, this is a 3,500 watt inverter. Your DC air conditioner is running full blast. How many watts you have available? 3,500 watts, because it's not going through the inverter. So you have it all available to you. Let's say that DC air conditioner, the compressor shuts off at night at some point, right? Well, with the DC one, it don't matter because you don't have to have your inverter on. With the competition, you have to have the inverter on all the time. You remember how much I use 10% just running that 24 hours? So they're using 10% of the battery just to run their air conditioner at standby, even when it's not even running mode. So when it shuts off at night, it's still taking power. Those are huge advantages that can't be, downplayed. Because all it comes down to is, it goes back to just like the miles per gallon item. If I'd go drive just as far with this truck to get 6 miles a gallon as I can with that Prius. But if all you're caring about driving there, you'd rather go with the smaller tank. I don't want to fill up a huge tank and drive. It don't matter if I'm going the same distance, because that costs money. It takes time to charge that, and it adds weight to the vehicle. It takes up internal storage too. So the efficiencies is the name of the game once we start to go, just like it is with fuel, any kind of fuel. With this battery, it's going to be the same thing. You want to use the power that's in there just as the most efficient way you can, which is the way that Jayco is doing it. DC power appliances, because they're the most efficient. You get twice as much runtime for the same power. So those are huge benefits. You'll see on this front page, you'll see all the specs if you want to get into details. These are, most of them, the components, the battery, the inverter, this portable solar that's mounted, and the regulator for the alternator are all inside the coach, usually in a cluster somewhere close. So you can access those. Those are hidden. The alternator's up front. They do also have a solar panel on the roof for your chassis battery. So when it's sitting on the lot, at least it's getting a trickle charge no matter where it's at. So that's an added benefit, because you don't have the emergency start anymore like you used to have, where you hold down a button and it connects the batteries, because the discharge rates are limited on lithium. So that's why you don't see them in car starter batteries as much. You're only talking 100 amps, which is a lot of power, but still for a car, you're taking like up to 600 cranking amps. That's a huge amount, spike all at once. And that's why the technology is different. These batteries are made to go long haul, which RVs use. Bluetooth. So another way is to keep track of your battery besides the screen here. And then you have the Firefly inside. They'll have a Firefly monitor also. Is the Bluetooth. We can download DC Home on the Renogy app. That's made by the same company as these. We have 2 Bluetooths installed on the coaches. You can go in there and hit the plus sign on the first tab, and it'll pull up everything that's in sight that's close to you. Look for your 2 devices you want, charge controller and inverter. You hit confirm. Once you do that, it's loaded into your memory. It'll stay in there. It'll be light gray if they're not active, if it's shut off, and then it goes brighter when it is and shows that red dot. You'll have them there. Then you can click which one you want to look at, dial in on. And it'll show you all the charging, what's going on with it, what your loads, what your usage has been like, what's the status of the battery, everything like that. You get that information on your app then. So that way if you're talking to someone or you want to take a screenshot, or if, like most campers, you want to know like, okay, well look, I was here 3 hours ago, here's where I'm at now, you know what you're at, how long I can get, how long you're going to be able to run systems for. Educate the customer. Most of the users when they're camping are going to be using that more often. I think we hit a lot of the systems. And what would go to the next one I didn't touch on the last class, which is, go one more, or keep going, go to the curve, there you go. So this is the curve and the high idle, which I didn't get into yet. So this is the actual alternator RPMs, which is, this curve starts about 1,200 or around 1,000 on the Sprinter, and I think around 900 on the other ones. But once you have to get up to that many RPMs on the chassis before this kick in, and then you can see it really climbs really quick. So it's no problem when you're actually driving it. If they're stationary, they're sitting though. There's a high idle aftermarket kit, which is that same place by the solar. If you look down at the solar blanket on the first page, Mint City Solar, they sell the high idle too aftermarket that goes with the Sprinter. So you can set it for 12 to 1600 RPM, whatever you want. That way the customer can turn it on and charge when they're sitting still also, which is a big benefit. And then also they've worked on with us to develop a auto start for some of the other future products coming out. And those will be able to turn on when the battery gets the predetermined set point, and the chassis will start, run, fill it back up, and then shut off. So it's going to be just like an auto gen start on your generator. So all these components probably over the next 12 months are going to be growing so fast, because anybody that goes to the West Coast that has a camper, they're going to, right there, there's laws out to ban all generators on the West Coast coming up at the end of the year. So it's going to be coming huge across the RVs. And
this year?
At the end of next year,
This
2024.
Oh.
So we got 12 months, but that being stuff you're selling on, people are going to start questioning that more and more. And I see that going to the federal parks, though, everywhere across the whole U.S. right after that takes effect. And they're already limiting when you could run generators because of noise and other things. These systems are growing so fast. We're doing a container of batteries into this industry every month. That's how much we're getting into lithium. So, and that's just our company. So, questions?
So real quick, yeah, where do I start, huh? On this samkoon screen, as Chris had said, you can tap it, wake it up. It does list state of charge. This says 38%, and it also gives you your voltage as well. State of charge has a margin of error. I think it's a plus or minus 5% or so.
Yeah.
So state of charge is kind of a dangerous thing to go by. But just like on a gas chassis, your car, you're running out of gas, you just pour gas into the tank, starts right up. A diesel engine's a lot different. It does require more work, adding fuel into your fuel filter, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, it is a lot more difficult. A customer needs to understand that just as they have never run their diesel chassis out of fuel, In an ideal world, the customer would never run this battery bank, this fuel source out of fuel. And so as the customer is noticing that we're getting down to about 38%, if I'm the customer and I'm out camping, I'm going to start thinking, all right, at 38%, when I'm going to have to start thinking towards how am I going to charge this system. We would recommend at a minimum start charging at 20%. The reason I say that is because at 10%, this battery goes into self-preservation mode, and the whole charging system cycle becomes a lot longer. They run the thing out of fuel. They get this down to about less than 10%, 5%. They're again plus or minus 5% state of charge. This becomes a lot more lengthy to get this thing recharged. If it's just a momentary thing, I think Chris had said earlier it could be an 8 to 12 hour deal to get it going. But if it's been draining itself for a while, it could be potentially as long as a week to get this thing revived if it's been not maintained for quite some time. So let the customer know that this fuel system is just like their diesel generator or their diesel chassis. If your customer doesn't understand that, I would say your walkthrough department, but ultimately it comes back to us as salespeople. There again, that's on us. They need to understand to avoid as many problems as possible. Keep this thing above 20%, and they should be golden.
So let's say we got that rig 10 days ago.
Yep.
That may be
You already
hypothetical,
killed
maybe
it?
for
You already left the 12
Let's
volts
just
on.
say-
Yeah.
We got it 10 days ago. What mode should it be sitting out there on the lot right now?
It should be off.
It should be off with it. I assume that's how you're
Yeah,
checking, right?
so if everything's off, like it should be, what would my first move to be out, to go out there, what do I wanna turn on?
So
First move.
First move, just like when I started the presentation, is
That
make sure there's
switch,
no
which
charging,
allows that other
the
switch
engine
to
shut
turn.
off, yep, engine shut off, and the short cord's not plugged in.
Correct.
And then you come over here, and this switch would be out,
the
so it
short
would
cord's
be out.
Not plugged
Go ahead and turn
in.
it off and then pretend
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
off.
so it's off, that's where it's at, that's where you're at when you pull in, this is the situation he's describing. So we have no lights, I come in here, nothing's on, right, there's nothing, I push this in, still nothing, I'm not gonna know until I get up here where we're at, and then I'm gonna hold this button down, and I watch it, it goes power light right away, then you get this, but you wait, you get numbers, actual numbers showing my voltage, then I let go. 52.2 is what it says right now is where the voltage is. I do a quick assessment, because I know 51.2 is nominal, so if anything over that 51.2, I know I'm in the middle range of the battery. That's where the middle. And you go up to 54.5 is full. So I can check my SOC, yep, that makes sense too. And then if it's anything under 95%, the next thing I should do is plug the coach in and charge it until this says 100% and the voltage is over 54 volts.
So you plug
That's
the
calibrated.
Coach in and turn on the inverter.
Yes, correct. Thank
You
you.
gotta hold that button down and the light comes on.
This one you just push in and it comes on.
Doesn't it take a couple seconds?
Yeah.
It goes through it, but you don't have to hold it down. Yep. That one's like this, it's a locking switch, so it does lock in.
So Mike, on that, we ship them shut off. I have been at down the road a Pilot gas station, middle of the night, coming back from the airport, and customers, it was in summertime, the AC was going. And with our transport companies, we tell them not to sleep in it, not to mess with it, but there is, in all reality, there's a probability that there's a good chance somebody turned the system on and they left the inverter on, and it's going to come to your place in maybe not the state that we sent it. So, there again, you don't do the check-in. I know you don't, but at the same time, at check-in, they should be looking for
At this
that.
point, they won't know unless they just
Yeah.
got what you said.
Yeah.
And that's any though. I'm saying that's not just this. So I make lots of different lithium systems for different manufacturers, 12 volt included. And the thing you want to do, I can't stress this for every dealership, anytime you take delivery, is go out there and see the status of that battery.
Right on. And that's that far right little screen, which
Yep.
is Where's that in the,
Currently, that's hidden in an overhead cabinet.
in a Ford?
We'll sit out here.
In the Ford, yes, it's in your kitchen overhead cabinet.
Kitchen overhead.
At model change, we're moving all of those to a sidewall, so it's a lot more visible inside the
The
coach.
Mercedes is right there above that one.
Correct.
Pickup seat.
Yeah.
Both
The passenger
of them.
seats, yep.
Yeah.
Yep, right at-
It's in an overhead cabinet.
Above that, yeah.
You gotta go, yeah.
Yeah, always check that and go with it, and, you know, if you have a system, the solar, you can add solar eventually too, so for customers, they could add solar, and it makes the maintenance a lot easier, because if they had an external panel, leave it lay out on the ground, you can shut off the inverter, you don't need that to run your solar charging, even though it's built into the inverter, it's a 3-in-1, so it does shore power, it does, so shore charging, solar charging, and inverting all in this one box, which eliminates a lot of connections compared to other people. But also, that you don't need to have this on, so like if they have another blanket out there, that additional blanket will help them to keep that charged if they're dry camping.
So the terrains come to us with all that.
Right.
Any of our lithium
Yep.
systems, whether
It's
it's
all-
the
it's all-
Solstice, yeah, the Swift, the
It's the
Train,
system.
it's that.
Yep.
Yep.
It might be in different places, but
Correct.
it's in there.
Yep, and here shortly, all you guys will be at show season, so whether you're in Connecticut, whether you're at Novi, fill in the blanket, wherever, most of those indoor places are gonna have power supply, so you'll be plugged into that. But inside the coach during the show, you'll start to hear an audible beep. And it's the sound that made earlier, but it's a lot more frequent. First thing I would do is check to make sure that your inverter's on, because you're wanting to charge it as you are showing it with all the lights on and things. So
Right.
you start hearing that in the show, that's the first place to check. You don't need to call Renergy, you don't need to call Jamie or Rep, just check that first to make sure your inverter's on.
Well, we
You don't need to
could.
cover
Yeah.
it at all.
Well, I mean, the thing is, and that's a great point, because I've had people call me with other systems and this one both, and they're panic mode because they didn't check the status of their battery before they went to the show. Well, number one. Okay, so now I gotta tell them how to recover it, which we just went through, just turn it in, charge it all the way up, and then shut it back off before you ship it to the show. When you get there, just like when you take delivery, check it again at night, go through the same shutdown process all the way, because let's say you leave all that stuff on and someone's walking in that show and they're turning, you don't know what people have done. So your safest thing at the end of the night, if I was at a show, is to unhook it and shut this off. That way I don't have to worry about hearing that noise when I get there in the morning and finding out the generator or my power source is down at the show and now I don't have any battery for the whole show. So now I can't show off the number one reason I'm gonna sell this coach. I mean,
Yeah,
so.
and definitely, sorry to be so long-winded here, but definitely, as he said, before the show, this isn't the day before the show, the day before this unit's supposed to be transported to the show.
Yeah.
Like, let's plug it in, just see what's going on. Think ahead on this, because you said there's a 3%.
So 3% a
degradation.
month on there if you're not doing anything, but if an inverter's left on, it's
Yeah.
10% continuously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
if
that's-
you leave that on, it's taking 10% a day
A
off.
daily, yep.
yeah.
I got that out of the one video. I
One
saw.
question I have, you talk about shutting the whole system down before you completely turn that off. And we talk about making sure you're not plugged in, making sure it's not running. What about the solar? Do we have to go up and manually turn the disconnects on the solar?
There's a
there.
disconnect right inside. When you push that button right here, you can disconnect it.
That's right, that back wall.
Yeah, it's right next to it.
But I only have to do one?
Yes.
You only have to do one.
Okay.
The
But that is
RVI, the reason there's two of them, RVI put in case, like, if there's ever an accident on the road and you can't get inside the coach, they could turn it off there.
Okay. So it's one or the other. But is that counted as a charging source before you power it down?
Yes, it
It does
is.
need to be
Yes,
on.
and the reason you're doing that is just like a hose. So you have power coming in. You're not gonna get much from this panel. The likelihood of having any problem with that is zero, pretty much, maybe 0.1. But for that 0.1, it's better just to beat in everybody's mind,
Okay.
remove all charging sources. But it's just like a hose. I mean, if we got the alternator go, there's 100 amps. That's a fire hose. And you're trying to shut it off instantaneously, that's hard to do. And it's the same thing with electric. What happens, as soon as you remove where it could go, it's called transient power. That extra power that's in the line is gonna go somewhere in that chassis. And it might go to the inverter and blow it might blow the charge controller, it's gonna create damage. Probably a 25% chance that something's gonna be burned up if you don't do that.
it safe to assume since solar is taking off the way it is, and the battery system, that there's gonna be some type of a management system that's gonna start doing all of this?
Well, it's yes and no, right? So the management system is these things that communicate to you.
Yeah.
But it's just like an EV car. You're not gonna keep driving and leave it. The only reason people do this is because it's more like the radio in your current car. How many people have ever ran a regular car dead by leaving something on, leaving lights on, leaving stuff like that?
Yeah.
So even in non-EV cars, EV people have educated themselves and they know, like, I'm at 20%, it's cold out, I gotta get this somewhere warm and charge it. Even with cars, I mean, I got lightning out there, same thing, I get a light that says, make sure, if it's under 50%, it flashes on there. Plug in, whatnot, driving right away. So it's the same as that. That's education. So you're educating the people. But the management system, the way we do with the technology, because it's a secondary power system, not the primary, people are always going to ignore it until it's too long. And we build alarms in to take care of that. But people have to learn to respect those alarms and do stuff. I mean, it's just like the person that gets sick and doesn't take care of themselves. I mean, there's still people that do that. You know, we're having something, you're supposed to take care of me, it's telling you that. If people neglect it, it's gonna not live as long as it should. So management is the alarms, the system's already built into it. And that's on pretty much everybody. Everybody's inverter is built in there the same way. It's got an alarm before it discharges. And we even have a little bit more on there because I tell you, if you get a dead battery, it's literally shame on you because the 48 volt, the alarm on here is set for like 15% life. So it shuts off way before the 12 volt does because we wanted people to be able to say like, okay, I still need lights, I still need refrigerator, right? But the sad thing is they even leave that on and keep running it down. If a battery's dead and does not recover, it's because people left power on and they walked away and ignored it for months. Everyone I've seen that's been the case. It's months of sitting out in the cold and they still trying to drain it so it's trickling that down as far as it can get it.
Any other questions? Well. Okay, well, so, you good to go?
Yep, I think so.
We're gonna-
Well, on the mains, will that solar panel start charging that battery at all?
It's
Not
so
really.
little because
Yeah,
see what
not
happens
enough.
is if you have anything on, you're only getting so many hours of sunlight versus 24 hours.
It's sunny at 85.
Yeah, yep. Well, I mean, like right now up here in Indiana, you're getting 10%, so you're getting 20 watts for 2 hours. All right, we spent more than that turning this on and off while we were here during this presentation. So,
All right, we're gonna be on channel 10,
10?
and then we're gonna walk through the plan.